Hi, welcome to Thaddeus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil. Today we have two very, very exciting guests. I know I say that every week, but I have been blessed to have some very exciting people onto the platform. And I've been trying to get these two together for quite some time now. So today we have from Minnesota, Miss Lynn Piñgol, extraordinary construction person, developer, co-op development, land trust guru, just so many different things. And then we have Mr. Gary Hampton. Gary is a force in and of himself with agricultural cooperative development. They both are on the frontier, on the front lines of the new civil rights frontier in Minnesota. And I actively think about them and worry about them on a daily basis here lately. And there's so much going on that we want to uncapture and roll back. We had planned this out a couple of weeks ago. Actually, we've been talking about getting together and doing a show with the three of us for quite some time. So I'm happy to see that this has finally come to fruition. However, there's some recent developments in Minnesota with Alex Petrie recently yesterday, as well as Miss Renee Good last week. And Minnesota is definitely a hotbed of protests and civil unrest at this particular point, and has been at the forefront of this for quite some time now. So we couldn't really get into the show today to talk about one of the solutions in our realm is cooperative development and land trust. In my work, I have had the opportunity of meeting Miss Shirley Sherrod of New Communities, the first community land trust in the country. And that community land trust was an outgrowth out of the civil rights movement as they went to sign up voters for voting rights in the South. There was economic retaliation similar to the economic retaliation that we are witnessing today in real time. And in that particular weapon, it was kicking people off of the land so they had no place to live. And so Reverend Sherrod, Mrs. Sherrod's husband, he was at the forefront of recruiting for SNCC at the time. And he went on to Israel to study communal living in the kibbutz. And that was in the 1969-70. And so in 1971, they came back and bought 6,000 acres, which was unheard of at the time. And what they did was form new communities and had a land trust cooperative model. And the land trust model that they established is actually being utilized in 49 states today and was the precursor to the current land trust model. And with that, the model has evolved and it's done differently in a lot of different places. Some that I won't say we disagree with, but we definitely have a newer version, a newer approach to the land trust model and utilizing that with cooperative development. And it's touted as a tool for wealth building. I think as in its current construct, it's more of it acts as a place of rent control as more opposed to being a tool for wealth development. But in wealth development, you really can't focus on development, as I say, when your belly is touching your back. And so right now we face such significant food insecurity. And I think our cooperative development approach allows definitely a higher quality of life and provides farm to table food. And I just really want to get into it now and stop talking and boring you to death and get to our exciting dynamic guest. I'm going to start with Mr. Gary Hampton. Gary hails from the great state of West Virginia. He's been in Minnesota for quite some time. He's known throughout the country for his cooperative approach to land development and land trust when it comes to farming. So, Gary, I'm just going to start with you, and you jump in there and do whatever you want to do. We can go wherever you want to go. You would have to take your mic off of mute, Gary. You are lagging. Okay, so Lynn, we're going to pivot to you. while Gary somehow has 1G going over there. Hopefully, you can lend him another 2G so he can get up to speed.
Definitely, definitely. Hi everybody. Lynn Piñgol here, CEO of MaKee Company. We're a strategic consulting company, industry specific, here in the Twin Cities and all over the world. And excited to be on the show again today to talk about something that has been a topic of conversation, really, because land trust and cooperatives, really shared ownership models have been utilized for wealth building. And so today's conversation is something that I'm really, really excited about and really looking to collaborate with both Gary and yourself in terms of finding the right solutions and what makes sense for our community as it relates to land ownership, appraisals, and things of that nature. Gary, we got you back. That 2G worked.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but your mouth isn't catching up
you
with
hear
your sound. This is a radio program, so we don't really need to see you.
Oh, seriously?
No, we do need to see you because that goes onto the YouTube channel.
Yes, I kind of feel like I'm back in West Virginia right now with the broadband issues. So hopefully you can hear me here. I can hear the introduction. Yeah, I'm a transplant in the Twin Cities, and my journey here came through the co-op space, doing some consulting, and then connecting with folks on the land. I connected with a mentor from the Rondo community that, I ended up in the climate and the urban agricultural spaces, land access spaces, and really kind of weaving the cooperative and the commons methodologies into the work that I do, and also connecting with some of the existing work in the communities as well.
Can you tell us some of the projects that you've worked on? I know you've worked on a couple of really exciting, groundbreaking urban cooperative projects when it comes to agriculture.
Yeah, so one of the projects that I've been involved with it's a group called Commons Land. Early on, was able to get some philanthropy, foundational funding to start an agrarian land trust for BIPOC farmers. And there are some challenges. So I'm not going to say that it's completely a seamless or transition or whatnot, but is the fact that there's resources in using the land trust model to hold land in perpetuity for agrarian uses is exciting. And then also seeing also the local land trust being able to be a part of some of the work, and they're connecting with urban land access and holding land in perpetuity as well, for agrarian uses and agricultural uses as well. In addition to being involved with the USDA's National Urban Ag Initiative, I recently separated from that work, but part of a national initiative to understand what's happening in urban ag and what are the potential contributions of urban ag to the existing food system and agricultural ecosystem as well. Those are just a few things. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, they did, and I think one of the things that we have all been discussing is bringing it all together in an intergenerational cooperative development model, and in that model, talking about how to create shared tenancy, so the leasehold isn't carrying the burden of the estate, and you can recognize gains and losses in real time. And I will let the expert Lynn cover that area. Lynn, also, I want you to also speak about your international cooperative development work that you've done in Europe and how you've laced that back to the United States and bringing those factors together.
Sure, definitely. One of the things that's really great about the cooperative models in Europe is that shared ownership model, right? And it goes beyond cooperatives. There's various different shared ownership models that exist. There's a fractional ownership, which in the United States is predominantly used in like vacation homes and things like that. And then there's the cooperative models. And so because cooperative models gives power and gives the benefits to the owner, it really makes more sense when we talk about wealth generating mechanisms and things. And so when we look at doing commercial cooperatives, office building, office space cooperatives, when we look at residential, again, home cooperatives, and then we look at agriculture and farming, and how can we create a cesspool that mutually benefits not just the earth itself, but the individuals that's going to plant, harvest, and contribute to the food insecurities that exist in a lot of communities. And so when we look at what we can do agriculturally and what we can create with the farmlands that exist now that are owned by small farmers, and I'm not talking about leisure farmers, I'm talking about farmers who really want to make something of the earth that is not your rich big box folks. That's really what we want to look at. And even, Land O'Lakes is here in the Twin Cities, and that's a huge cooperative, as is Horizon. And so there's different models that exist, but in my perspective, we can do more to really, really create and really, really take hold of the meaning of wealth generation and wealth building in these shared ownership models. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'd like to pass this back to Gary and really talk about the land trust and how it's used agriculturally, how effective it's been, what's working in agriculture, and sort of just kind of tie us together, because the premise of what land trust is based on the originator and now in 49 states is good and solid, but has it truly benefited? So how's land trust being used in agriculture now, Gary?
Lynn, can I jump in there and ask one question before you get to Gary? You talked about the cooperative model being used here for vacation homes. Can you expand on that? Is that the timeshare model?
Yeah, the timeshare model is one of them. Fractional ownership is another, where you can resort living. It's almost like that type of thing where you get 9 months, right? You get or 3 months. Whoops, where you own a percentage of it, and it allows you to have time and space, and you get the benefits of writing it off and things like that. It's really quite interesting that America has used fractional ownership just in that sense. And I know that statutes and ordinances would have to change in order for fractional ownership to occur in housing models. But I do believe there is a way to navigate through statutes and ordinances of how we can connect fractional ownership cooperatives in that same cesspool of wealth building and wealth generation. Yeah.
So that I'm sorry, I want before that got too far down the rabbit hole. I don't think a lot of people quite understood. Thank you for clearing that up, Gary. Please go ahead and expand.
Yeah. So some examples within the land trust being used. I'll speak to the instance here with commons land. Is there's this interest of the commons holding this land in perpetually. So a land trust was established, and then within that, these clusters are under development, under discussion. But then, as you know, one example of one of the land acquisitions in Northfield was that there was already a group of farmers working the land and kind of working in commons, but and shared stewardship of the land. But then that's where the co-op piece comes in, because you have different cultures, different things, coming into play when you bring people from diverse backgrounds together on the land. So you have to have some type of governance structure. And then we some of the things is making sure that there's a purpose to, on the other end of bringing people on the land and connecting that land to that community value or enhancing or opportunities, et cetera. Because many times that's where the use of that land trust should be. It should be adding value to the individual, the family unit, or the overall community, or community itself. And then so is being able to make sure that when we acquire the land for agrarian uses, that it's affordable and can be held in perpetuity under the land trust. And then is the value is transferred, maybe not necessarily through the land, possibly to the constructs or structures above the land when we start layering it with the co-op piece, etc. So you have that model that's under development, and again, it's not seamless because we're really going against the mindset of individualism and capitalism in order to kind of do these things, but really they're just intentional efforts of working cooperatively and collaboratively in stewardship of the land. And so that's one instance, and Sarah as well been a part of, is the municipalities and the land trusts working together and holding land in perpetuity for agrarian purposes. So there's a prototype of pilot 2025. So a lot of, and you can throw in the black church as well, the churches and their land, seeing it as a somewhat gardens, mutual aid funding, or potentially value-added supply chain products for local entrepreneurs.
So, Gary, on the value add, the one point that I would like to add is the quality of life and food sovereignty, and how that's increased through that model, and being able to get better fresh farm to table food and improving people's health.
You had cut out.
I was just saying, with the model, I wanted you to expand on the opportunities in the space to improve quality of life and increase the level of food sovereignty with fresh farm to table food, improving folks' quality of life through improving their health and the quality of food that they're eating in that space.
Oh yeah, I definitely, because with growing and producing your own food, you know where it's coming from. Who's growing it, what's being used to grow it, and so when we look at the different health disparities that afflict not only urban but also rural areas, is many times it's due to the convenience foods, the more accessible, high value, like processed foods. And so anything that we can do to have individuals be able to have access to those foods to be put on their table adds value to their quality of health. Even looking at some of the kind of intangible and kind of transferable soft cost of producing your own food, either for your family or your community or your neighbor, there's this economic impact on your bottom line. There's the time spent in production also attributes to encouraging and building your own individual health, because it's giving you that exercise. So there's all these intangibles that come with it, but most of all is that increased access to healthy foods. And then even when we do that, we also have to take into consideration that there's going to be some behavioral changes that are going to be required, because people are so used to convenience store foods or high processed Dollar General or Dollar Tree foods or whatnot, when grocery stores aren't available in their community. So, anything that we can do to help shore up the food system in urban and rural communities that are struggling to meet their local food needs, will help in the overall, I think, health disparities. And when we look at the overall health indexes of communities, I think that can also have some change. So it's is when we really get down to it, it's that connection with the land. When you connect with the land, you connect with the body, the spirit, etc. And so I think there's a lot more to it than just saying, "Hey, we're just growing food."
And the other piece is in these agricultural cooperatives that you've been working in, what is their proximity to food deserts and what are the food choices in those areas?
Oh man, but one of the areas just lost to Cub Foods. I mean, you have some other small different grocers, but as far as having a major grocer, is you have these urban areas that won't have a grocery store in their communities, and then many times when you start looking at, although there are some cooperative markets in some communities, sometimes it's not feasible. Sometimes the price points do not meet the uh, is not economically viable for folks adjacent or within those communities to even shop at the co-ops. And that's not me just saying that hypothetically. That's going and value pricing different business structures around food access, et cetera. And then there's also saying that it's an urban and rural challenge when it comes to, and it's not food deserts. Let's call it a food apartheid, because it's man-made, it's systemically created situation. But then that's where potentially land trusts and co-ops come back into this as possibly being part of that solution when we're in these situations.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Look, we know that agriculture, the food securities or the lack of food within the community is a challenging thing, and that there are solutions that exist out there. And that intrinsic value that Gary's referring to is equally strong, right? And that's why we have this mass push for urban agriculture, right? But the thing that's being defined in urban agriculture, and sometimes it's not considered sufficient because we look at urban ag as if it's just your casual farmer. Oh, it's hobby gardening, right? So we'll put a plot of land here, a neighborhood garden, and it's not really necessarily designed to provide food sources for the community. And I think we need to pivot. We need to it truly is a solution. And when we operate from a lenses that urban ag doesn't belong in our community, in the cities, in the downtowns and things like that, and we don't consider that a contributing factor to solving food affordability in neighborhoods and food accessibility, that's where the sort of the rubber meets the road type of thing, if that's making sense, because we're not including urban agriculture as a solution. We're just looking at it from the lenses of, oh, it's a trend, oh, it's cool, oh, it's neat. We'll put some boxes here, we'll put some plots of land here and make that accessible to community, and really not make it a part of an economic solution. And so
that's very powerful what you say, and you don't really need a lot of space. I know at our school, at our entrepreneurial high school at Best Academy, we have a 500 square foot container farm. And with the container farm, we'll be able to produce 150 pounds of leafy green vegetables a week. That's
right.
enough to feed everybody in the school and the community, which is in the middle of a food desert. So,
Exactly.
Gary, Gary, I want you to expand and talk about aquaponics, hydroponics, and those things, and the level of impact that they can have, not only just in urban settings, but also in rural settings, and how that kind of evens the playing field. Because, again, we're back to it's really going to take all of us. And I believe with the recent thing that was going on with the SNAP benefits, it brings everything full circle as an unintended consequence that this isn't about black and white. It's a simple question. Are your children hungry? How will you feed your community? That's the number one thing that everybody needs to focus on. And right now, I believe that is the thread that connects all of us.
Yeah. So to segue into that, I want to touch on something Lynn said. Is like, yes, we have to look at the economization of urban ag beyond just mutual aid, and that perspective is actually urban ag is no different than rural ag. It just provides, it may be scattered plots instead of congruent plots, and it may be vertical spaces and innovative spaces as well, because you're able to grow inside and in smaller and leverage technology. And it can also be done in rural spaces as well. And so is when we start looking at that innovative piece and different things of that nature, is like, okay, now we can have the indoor grow, we can have the hydroponics, we can have the aquaponics all working together. Utilizing, the fish water, the chicken poop, just like kind of closed loop opportunities of growing and production in these smaller spaces. But then there's also connecting it to a larger food system solution or food sovereignty solution. And I think that's in particular urban ag. What I find also in the national food sovereignty movement, in the Black cooperative space and other spaces, is that agriculture, urban ag, is connected to that body of work. So it's given that land purpose automatically. So it's not only meeting the mutual aid, but it's making its way into the cooperative grocery stores or value added the supply chain, because value added sauces, jellies, or et cetera, are being produced. So all of those. So is the innovative opportunities of technology, of these different practices, will only add value to urban ag, especially in the days and times of climate change that we're seeing, to where, some areas are going to see a change in what they can grow and how long they can grow. Some places are going to see it extend. Some places may lose their agricultural infrastructure. So, utilizing, hydroponics, aquaponics, and indoor grow processes are going to be some of the innovative ways of continuing our food production, especially at the localized levels. And you don't have to have a lot of space to produce a lot, but then is when we're aggregating and really working cooperative across the community agro ecosystem, then is we have the potential to meet our needs for each and everybody in our community at some level.
Lynn, can you expand on that?
Yeah, to Gary's point with regards to, what does urban ag and how is it defined? Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. We just need to redefine what urban ag truly means so that funding sources will incorporate it. And we need to shift the thinking of this. Farms have to be congruent. I can never say that word. Right next to each other, right? It can be on rooftops. It can be on plots of land. It can be in containers. And so I think that's the overall messaging for me that I would expand on, is we need to redefine it, because we are not necessary, or maybe it's the ecosystem that is having a difficult time trying to really understand urban farming and urban gardening and all of that stuff, and the thinking that it is a habitual gardener versus a intent to cure the insecurities that's happening in our community. I think that really is the key, and such. And then how do we create the mechanism? How do we create the mechanism so that we do have control of these urban farms or these lands, and what tools can be used to get there, right? And again, we looked at land trusts, we look at cooperatives, we look at different types of things, and then even solutioning. I know Gary just mentioned hydroponic and things like that, but there's also the aquavoltaic that we could use for solar and farming animals and that type of stuff, right? So there's all sorts of different mechanisms with regards to this conversation of agriculture that can be truly utilized urban and even traditional farming mechanisms. Yeah.
So I think those are some really, really good points. And one of the things that I look at, especially since we're talking about the cooperative model, and from a valuation perspective, a little bit that is that we talked about the fractional ownership with the cooperative model utilizing the joint tenancy. That's going to be a little bit different than the partial interest. So that's valued differently, and they both tie together in an agricultural valuation standpoint because a lot of the partial interest is a little bit less than fee simple, and a lot of that stuff is utilized for conservation easements. So, and that's in the preservation, but there's a distinct difference between the partial interest and the fractional ownership. So, those are a couple of the points that I wanted to keep people clear on in this conversation. And I think the changing of the model, I think, is going to be, like you said, Lynn, looking at it through a different lens. But I think now more than ever, this is an opportunity to bring all of this together. And what Gary talked about is historically the religious community or faith-based community has been intricate in all of these things as far as feeding the community. And this is another model that they can look at to feed and house. So this is some of the stuff that we talk about in our Outside the Barn series as we tour the country, bringing these opportunities together to change the paradigm and change the thought. But it all starts with the getting awareness and making people understand the power that they have in the land, and they're not making anymore. So this is a great opportunity to take advantage because at this point, it doesn't appear as though the government is interested in feeding people or making sure that people eat. And so people need an alternative to be able to take care of themselves and have stability and security. And in Minnesota, you all are unique from an agrarian standpoint because your complete and total supply chain is interconnected.
That's right. That's right. You know, I want to go back to the rationale of land ownership, right? I mean, just in the last 30 days, we learned, I can't remember his name, but just his name, I just lost his name. He just has the over 1 million acres of land he now owns, right? And Bill Gates is second to that. There's a reason why these guys are land grabbing right now. There's a reason. There is a reason why everybody's land grabbing right now. And the model of a community land trust is trying to keep up with that trend, right? And looking at it from again, advantages is permanent affordability, anti-displacement, right? And then we got the big guys coming in and asking and buying more land. Why are they buying more land? Because they see the value in land ownership, period, right?
But also, I think the land ownership and in the home ownership has been, how should I say this? Indigenous communities it have always lived on a communal model and didn't believe that you could actually own the land. And so that is a relatively colonization European type of model used for displacement and a footprint around the world, to be quite honest, but in particular here. And so when we talk about land justice, land valuation, that's why the reconsideration of value is so important because it's the number one tool as far as wealth preservation. And why that's equally important is because over 65% of all Black people's wealth is in real estate. And that is in and of itself protecting the erosion of that asset. And it's looking at it from an objective lens. So if you want to arrest the erosion of generational wealth, then reconsideration of value is the platform that I've been standing on top of and screaming at the top of my lungs So hopefully it will start to have a better understanding and appreciation in that model. But moving forward, I definitely believe the land trust and the cooperative model leads to sovereignty and independence and being able to pass down intergenerationally. Lynn, I know you have lots of ideas on how that works and how it works best based on your experience in Europe and working with those cooperatives. Can you talk about those models? I know we beat to death why we think land trusts don't work. I like to focus on what the solution is that we think will make it work and be a great tool for everybody.
Sure. Actually, before we get into the solutioning and the different options that exist in shared ownership model, I want to go back to your question of what's going on in Minnesota and the landscape of agriculture in Minnesota. And Gary, I'm gonna put you on the spot here because this is probably more your understanding than mine. The state of Minnesota has the two greatest grain owners, right? We have Pillsbury and we have Gold Medal, right, Gary? Yeah, the flour company.
The flour, Gold Medal Flour, yes.
Gold Medal Flour and Pillsbury is located in Minneapolis. And that's the start of the agricultural phenomenon of Minnesota. And then we also have Land O'Lakes. We have Jennie-O Turkey here and things like that. So Minnesota has been a huge contributor to agriculture. And I think, Gary, if you can share a little bit about that landscape and why agriculture is such a thing in Minnesota. It's been in our DNA because of the milling companies in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and I think if you not just Minnesota, you just look at the heartland, the Midwest itself, and its role within the agricultural landscape, and so Minnesota falls right within that, and then Minnesota, has that they is very cooperative friendly with its policies and laws and different things like that. So as the ag community itself it seems there's a lot of regional support also and supply with the supply chain as well, and then so is when with this day and time when you're losing labor and resources, that's going to show up on everybody's grocery bill. That's going to impact, everybody's like bottom line and home budget. So there's going to be this trickle down effect of this agricultural impact. But just the Midwest itself is so important to the U.S. agricultural ecosystem. And then as you have, let's look at the ag, let's look at the natural resources, the headwaters of the Mississippi, et cetera, as part of this kind of agricultural ecosystem and phenomena. But I think I think not just Minnesota, but I think Minnesota's efforts around ag policy and land access is something to note as well, and being even on the forefront of some of the conversations around urban agriculture as well. And still a lot of that still comes out of the Midwest. We have to bring Detroit into play as well. But all of this, the agricultural sector, especially at the local and regionalized, is many times that's the food that makes it back into our local food systems. And so when that's disrupted, so many things are going to be disrupted no matter what your social status is. Everybody's going to be impacted. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Lynn, or your ping to me.
Yeah. No. I just wanted our audience to sort of connect to to Thaddeus's original question there before we got into the solutioning and options that exist and things like that. So thanks.
I got one more question before we get to solutioning, and this is the elephant in the room, and I like you all's perspective on how this is impacting the agricultural landscape as well. You all's funding, federal funding, has been frozen for the entire state. What is the result, and how long will this impact you all, and what is the fallout? Because there is no mission without no money, and this crosses and impacts all sectors in Minnesota on top of everything else.
Absolutely, absolutely. The freezing of USDA funds may, that not only affects SNAP, right? It affects all farmers across the board, and we're still recovering from not being from our products not getting unloaded and shipped off to other countries because of tariffs. I think we mentioned that in our last podcast and things like that. So there is that element that is already in existence in agri farming, where they've lost crop revenue, they've lost all of this stuff because tariff and things like that. And so now that the tariffs are lifted, to China, like, right, who purchases the majority of our soybeans and things like that, let's look at how can we get back into rhythm of things and start growing what we need to grow so we can export it out. Well, now we're cutting off the funding to support that. So it's like this crazy, who's thinking and who's not thinking in this type of conversation. Gary, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, so that it makes me circle, and Lynn, it just makes me think of some of the conversations that we've had about localized solutions. Even after hearing the local state, like the Minnesota Ag leadership, on their press release or their press conference, speaking around the impact of agriculture or whatnot in Minnesota, even think more of a reason of, like, how do we reduce dependency on federal funding or federal subsidizing of our efforts? But then it's like, wow, like those funds paid for, the sourcing and production, or will pay for, or it just feeds this whole economic ecosystem that is like, okay, production, SNAP benefits, USDA, and it's really so intertwined. You can't just feel like you can just pluck one piece out of it and it's not going to cause other spaces or other things to crumble. But I just think that it is the instruments of land trusts, cooperatives, and agricultural food systems are going to be so much more essential. They need to be considered as, what is that hyper local solution? What is that localized regional solution? And I think, man, we've had this conversation about 100-mile, 200-mile radius in different spaces of looking at that with intentionality. And when I saw this leadership speaking and worrying about this federal, I'm like, we may have the solutions here. We may have some of the tools and instruments already in place to create this infrastructure, this agrological ecosystem that can actually meet the needs of Minnesotans, and possibly our regional communities as well. So, it's just there. I think a lot of things are there, and I think we really have to look at more localized and regionalized state level solutions for food access, food security, and depend less on imports, but yet on imports from other states possibly. And as far as intrastate and interstate commerce on a domestic level.
And look, if we're not dependent on the feds for their funding, now's the good time to start looking at what we can do locally. Like, right. For real, especially right now that's happening. Something's supposed to happen September 5th and 6th, where more federal funds could potentially be frozen for the state of Minnesota. but we want to fund billion-dollar packages to have ICE in here, right? We want to fund that, but not the food and the agricultural ecosystem that could actually help civilians, community, and residents of the state of Minnesota, right? So the priorities, it's beyond definition, it's beyond reframing. And then again, some of our, I will be critical, some of our organizations also need to reframe how they're pitching their mantra for food securities and redefine what it is they're really trying to do to help agriculture, right? Because it also starts there, and such. So again, I'll go back to local, I'll go back to our nonprofit organizations who are doing great work but need to do better work, and hold them accountable for the foods solutions that they promised they're going to deliver, right? They said they were going to deliver. They got to use this model. We've done so many administrative, we got to build the system. The system has been built, period. So let's start implementing. Let's use what we have. Let's start implementing.
So Lynn, to your point, this is one of my other frustrations, always looking outward. I think we got to start looking inward to some of these legacy organizations as far as agriculture, rights, because whatever they've been doing has not worked because it's been an abject failure. So to say we've been here and we've been doing it and to keep doing that way is the definition of insanity. We need a complete and total framework and a complete and total model to be able to move forward, in my humble opinion.
I agree with you. In our humble opinion, our opinions don't matter, right? Well, and again, it's really, we have to educate. For those who know what outside world models have worked, and I mean, I get told that all the time, Lynn, this is in Europe. Lynn, this is in Asia. Yeah, but there's something over there that's working that we could, make better in the United States because we are the land of the free and opportunities and all this other jazz that we're touting as Americans, right? So if we can get that and make it better, I mean, I'll go back to the people that were sent on the ships to go to America were the rejects of Europe. And when they got here, they said, you know what? We're going to do better in America. We're not going to do what Europeans do. We're going to do better in America. It's in our DNA to do stuff better. So you're right. The stuff in Europe, we bring it here, we make it better. The stuff in Asia, they do it there, we bring it here and make better. That's what we do. So why are folks so resistant to the idea, right? Is it change or is it's just more comfortable to do what we like to do? And that's probably why, I don't get on the popular list because I have, quote, very strong opinions of how things ought to be. Well, yeah, because we're doing the exact same thing, but we're polishing it, changing the color. It's still red, but we're not going to call it cerise.
Lynn, I don't think you or me are winning any popularity contests these days in our trusted professions. But
that's true. Very true.
Yeah, and Lynn, just to add to that, I think that that whole education piece, I think it has to, one, around the kind of communal stewardship of leadership, their education around stewardship, I think, and then also around the co-op model, one as well. I think a lot of people don't understand that because then that's why they can't finance it. That's why they can't seem to find a lane or pathway to support what's just another business structure, but yet it could still be an LLC, this or that, but we can't fund it because, it doesn't fit within the constraints of capitalism, individualism, and extractive and exploitive. So it's like, but it's very fundable. It's fundable globally. You know what I mean? It's fundable here, but like, how do we really invest? Because I think and then that's some of those solutions inward, because those are community stewarded solutions that takes away power from a lot of the decision makers or holders of the purse strings and tethers of funding, et cetera. So it's not that it's necessarily innovative. I think it's kind of intrusive and invasive around the standard way of doing. And
But I
so
think, Gary, to your point, how we also get around that, and my contribution in this area is the valuation portion and how it's valued and how it mitigates the risk. So everybody wants to know where is the value, and if you can lay that out, and that helps to mitigate the risk, to help sort of kick the can down the road and increase the level of comfortability. And that's where you got to figure out. We've got to figure that part of it out, because the grant model is not working. It's not sustainable. And we need to be, at this point, self-sustaining, revenue generating, and being able to support one another in these models. And I think this model works. And Lynn, that's the part we need you to go ahead and bring home. Rick keeps in my ear about our time. But, when I got two powerful, heavy hitters, I can't constrain you all to just 1 hour. So we're going to go wherever it goes. But the outline is typically one.
Well, we're going to try to flower it an hour. Right?
Yeah.
But
I saw Lynn getting so excited to chime in, too. Lynn was ready to lean in on something as well just before you jumped in. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm going to lean in. When Gary said the financing model for any shared ownership does not exist, amen. Because I'll tell you what it is. In establishing, again, I've read several statutes and several ordinances in various states and cities as it relates to cooperative, and it doesn't connect to the financing ordinances and regulations that exist anywhere, right? There are very few shared cooperative financing institutions. And if they are financing institutions for cooperatives, they still base the foundation of qualification on traditional funding models. How you apply a traditional funding application process, which means I'm not going to give you $1 million loan on a cooperative because I want personal guarantees from every single member. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. A cooperative model is owned by one single entity, and the entity has multiple shareholders. You cannot tie the membership shareholders to the entity itself, because now we're just a traditional corporation. Okay. That's one
that part of the model has always been underserved communities over collateralizing. So we'll give you $1 million, but you got to tie up $10 million worth of assets.
That's right. And so now we don't have the appraisal component in it, because appraisals aren't even in the financing conversation of cooperatives. Y'all come later. Once we figure out how we're going to fund this cooperative project or the shared ownership project, we'll figure out how the appraisals can tie in. But we want to make sure you're secured. We want to make sure you're firstborn, you're secondborn, all of that generational piece. It ain't generational wealth. That's generational debt that we're going to incur and tie you in this cooperative investment model. And this is why, again, which, Rick, we're going to get into the solutioning. Who owns the land? If you cannot own the land, if you do not control the land, what can you leverage? Community Land Trust owns the land. Fractional ownership, you get to co-own the land. The cooperative, you get to co-own the land. This is one thing. If we, as communities of color, have been programmed, because statistics say 65% of us have wealth in real estate, then why are we pushing a model that does not allow us to own land? That's one. Two, if we don't own the land, who gets to collateralize the value of the land in traditional financing models? Sure, we can make it affordable. Sure, we can make it low entry point. Sure, we can do anti-displacement solutions. Sure, we can do all of that for point of entry. But let's not sell the wealth building generational component. when you're in that specific program. Whereas as a cooperative, whereas a fractional ownership, your rate of return on equity is moderate to high. Fractional ownership is a high return on investment. But in cooperatives, you get a moderate return. So let's push cooperative because that's the middle lane. We have more control, more balanced approach to affordability and wealth.
And I think, Lynn, from a valuation standpoint,
and
you want to
we can
start,
scale.
From a valuation standpoint, you may not start with the appraisal up front. You may start with the market analysis up front. And so you have some assumptions that you make or hypothetical conditions that you make. And then you are able to test those hypothetical conditions and extraordinary assumptions with the end product. But it gives you a starting point. And I think that's where the model needs to go in order to, again, start to have risk. And even if you're looking at the residential sector now, they're offering appraisal waivers. So that's something that is starting to grow. I think that same level of waiver can start to apply to the cooperative model on a bigger level, but then you're going to base it on the market analysis. So you have some sort of substance or some sort of documentation to mitigate the risk. It's all about mitigating the risk and as you talked about, calculating the return. And this is where we start to look at generational wealth. And we look at in the heirs property space, this is another opportunity when you have fractionalized interest to be able to bring it together to preserve that, not only preserve it, but increase the generational wealth by having an active plan. And I think that's something Gary talked about earlier, being proactive as opposed to being reactive. And we're always on the back of our heels. But again, it's going to take conversation, changing the conversation and the thought. And quite frankly, Lynn, your frustration is my frustration with the legacy organizations and acting as gatekeepers and not allowing progress.
Yeah, I think when I look at the models for agricultural cooperatives and that what is this called? A hobby gardener or a hobby farmer or a seasonal gardener, a seasonal farmer. You know, we can grow mass amounts of food in containers. But what if we got land and was able to double production? And then the whole community gets to share because we own 100 acres or 200 acres. Hey, you know what? I won't even go into hundreds. What if a community owned 10 acres of land that produced lettuce, right? What does that do to a community's ecosystem for agriculture? And everybody wins. The economy stays circular. The economy stays circular, and that's the beauty of it. And then it becomes generation because we own the land that's constantly producing revenue for everyone. Right? And then you divide and conquer that. And guess what? We uplift not just one organization, we uplift multiple families generationally all at the same time. That's the power of shared ownership in cooperatives and fractional ownerships and that type of stuff. And that is the shared ownership model in the United States need to be reframed to demonstrate how ownership and generational wealth can be done together. And still, the power of ownership and wealth generation belongs to the people, not to an organization. That's the message that needs to get articulated, especially in the agricultural realm, especially in the appraisal realm, because the two need to be connected in the shared ownership model. Because without the right individuals like yourself that actually understand how to appraise land tied to generational wealth building, it ain't gonna work. The three of us are gonna keep spinning our heads trying to make solutions that is so logical to us, but to others are hindered by compliance and regulations and all the policies in the world.
I think we just have to keep biting the elephant one bite at a time. And I think we are definitely making some impact. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to speak yesterday at a new cooperative that's being developed, the Southeastern Heritage Cotton and Soybean Cooperative. And it's being headed up by the young third generation farmers out of Louisiana, the Nelson brothers, with a couple of other young farmers out of Mississippi, South and North Carolina. I'm really excited about them. They were supposed to have their first annual meeting this past weekend, and because of the weather, it was supposed to be in Birmingham. They restricted it to a Zoom call on Friday, which I couldn't participate in because I was taking a class on how to value conservation easements, and so I'm constantly trying to challenge myself to expand my understanding in the space so that I can be a resource.
Sure. For sure.
And Lynn, your explanation was very sound. I'm going to see if Gary has anything he wants to chime in on before we close. We're a couple minutes over, but again, I'm not really worried about the time. Rick is an excellent editor, and plus, if we go over, we just go over.
Yeah. So real quick, I appreciate it, Thaddeus and Lynn, and I'm just going to just layer right off of what Lynn was saying. With the way some of these institutional and economic tools are being used, is I feel like sometimes they see themselves as the only part of the solution, when no, you're not the only part of the solution. You're part of a multifaceted solution of either other infrastructural tools or institutional tools or economic tools that add value to your existence, adds value to those that are benefiting and utilizing your services, et cetera. So it's like, just real quick, it's just like, okay, what if the land trust held the land? And what if the people owned what was above the land and then built equity within that? So then you have that generational wealth. You're able to redistribute that, and that can get kind of dicey or whatnot. But I think we have to kind of proactively look at some of these things as, again, shifting the mindset of stewardship, one, and then is also, what role does your institution, your body of work really play within the community? And then is, how does that play and intersect and hold its interdependence in lifting the community within working with other bodies of work, et cetera? So it's like not just one, but it's almost like Tetris. We want this puzzle to work, but it's like, a puzzle is never one piece. A puzzle is multiple pieces to the solution to get to where we want to be. So I think that's just so important for folks to consider, on top of the re-education of how some of these institutionals leadership go about their work in institutions themselves.
Rick, you're going to hate me because I got to challenge Gary on a statement that he made. He said that land can be owned by a land trust, and then the box on top of it can be owned by the community. That's great. That's great. That's a great solution. However, that's called a land lease, right? The land is going to be owned by one entity, and the box is going to be owned by the residents or by the shareholders. In a cooperative, it'll be the shareholders. Great model. I don't have an issue with that, but there needs to be an exit, right? Whether it's in 10 years' time that the landowner sells the land back to the shareholders. Because if there's no exit strategy, then it's all for nothing. We do not own the land. And again, on an appraisal level, the land is only worth X until the box on top of it exceeds the value of the land. And again, if the building is worth $100 million and the land is only worth $10 million, that's 1/10 of the cost. So there has to be some negotiation factors that happens if a land trust is going to own the land and then allow, again, lease, land, 99-year lease, y'all. That's what these hospitals are known for, 99-year leases in the United States, right? HCA, that's their model. Alliance, that's their model. They lease the land and then they build the entity on top of it. But the lease stays in the owner's name for 99 years. Get out of here. That's not going to work.
So that's the model that we've been talking about that doesn't allow the shared equity and the mark to market, because the leasehold is currently, it has to hold for that whole period. And it doesn't take at 50, 60, the leverage starts to shift. But then if ever somebody sells, again, the leasehold is still responsible and they don't get to mark to market in real time.
That's right. And so
Did I
for
get
me,
that right, Lynn?
yes. And so for me, the moment that when you approach a landowner, you better have Lynn Piñgol on drafting that agreement, because if you don't understand that component of how to exit the landlord, then your you can't even do a solid cooperative, because you don't own the entire thing. You're doing above surface equity, and that's not going to work. In any shared ownership model, land has to transfer at a certain point. So basically, you're a glorified renter pretending to be a co-op until the exit strategy of the land ownership reverts back to you. Are we trying to make landlords rich, or are we trying to make individuals rich?
The theory behind the land trust is that they want to have control to be able to go on into perpetuity. And I think that model is a little bit outdated and needs to be modernized. And when you know better, you do better. So I think this is the do better stage for us to be able to move forward and look at it from a different type of lens.
And I do know several land trusts in the United States is looking at what Europe is doing in terms of that 99, a leasehold. They're trying to say, at some point, this land trust model needs to be modernized to a leasehold model. Well, leasehold models have been in existence forever. So it's really more like they're going to adapt under the nuances, but statutes and ordinances is going to prevent them from converting all of their assets. Because if you tout being a land trust and now you're going to be a leasehold, guess what you are? A land owner. And that's the fine line that you're going to have to represent to community, that you are now a in-community landowner supporter. Make that make sense.
Well, to Lynn's point, I think a lot of communities do that and end up giving away the farm, because they could actually still be in control of the land when they have given it away. And then the land reverts back to the community after the 99 years. Now, if that's how the model is working, that model works. But I haven't seen that. The developers come in and end up really, for lack of a better word, pimping the community and stripping the community, and they're building generational wealth. And one of the illustrations that I always use in my presentation, and this did not come from me. I borrowed this from the great CCIM instructor Byron Smith when he talks about when China leased Hong Kong to Great Britain in 1867 and took a 99-year lease. Well, the difference between when they leased it and they got it back in 1998 was gazillions of dollars worth of difference. And China was so generous, they allowed them to buy some of it back, participate in some of it. They had absolutely nothing to lose. And that is the model that ends up happening. And that's the illustration that just shows the power of the land trust and the land lease. However, if we're talking about community building and community development, the model needs to change just a little bit in order so that it's fair for everybody and you're able to build wealth.
Or Thaddeus, we stop saying that it's a wealth generating tool. Just stop saying that.
Okay, we'll just say it's like the point I made originally when we opened. It's a form of rent control, which has also helped. That's a wealth building tool, because you don't have to worry about rental increases.
That's right. But let's not sell it. Yeah, let's not sell it as an opportunity. Let's not do this wealth. Let's just take generation out. That's not creating generational wealth. It is a form of wealth building at low entry point, at low rate of return. Let's put it out there like that. Then we don't have any issues.
Well, Lynn, I think you're taking a really Pollyannic approach there. You're acting like truth and transparency is the norm for today.
Doggone it, you're right. How dare I? How dare I be Pollyanna? What is that again? Pollyanna? What?
Now you got me laughing.
You know what? I'm gonna put that as my as my title on LinkedIn. My Pollyanna. I'm the Pollyannic perspective of whatever. I'm gonna need you to send that to me so that I can put that on.
Okay. Well, and please give me a little credit on the under tag there, Rick. We're at 1 hour and 12 minutes, so I'd like to thank my special guests, Gary Hampton and Miss Lynn Piñgol. We've only been talking about doing this for a year now. It doesn't matter. We got it done, and I think we're on the road to something special. You all are laying the groundwork in Minnesota, and I plan to come up to Minnesota as soon as the weather breaks. I don't think I could be of any assistance up there and all this.
Nope. You are coming when it's -20. You're not invited until it's -20. It's just the way it is.
No.
You are not invited unless we get to like -10, and then we're like, hey, you know what? You need to come down now because it's -10 until the next week.
You won't appreciate the summertime if you don't endure the winter.
Yes.
Yeah. We're in the middle of a ice emergency here in Georgia right now anyway, so
no.
I feel you all's pain. I can really identify with what's going on there in Minnesota from a weather perspective. So again, I'd like to thank both of you all, and if you are watching this, please like, share, subscribe. We will be touring the country. Thaddeus Dawson Speaks. I'm hoping to see Lynn and Gary at some of the policy summits and policy meetings. I will be bringing them with me on a couple of locations and tours as schedules permit, and we can get it together. Again, I'm so grateful and thankful for you two giants to come on to my little show here, and you all are welcome anytime. Lynn, I just got one last question. Who are you cheering for? Because I see your little Chiefs paraphernalia back there in the corner, and I know you're a diehard Chiefs fan. And I know the whole story behind why you're a Chiefs fan, but we don't have time to get into that today. We'll do that at a later date. I'm just saying who you got moving forward.
Patriots.
Okay, all right. Gary from West Virginia, I don't think you have a team, or we never talked about it.
I'm a Cowboys fan, always have been, even back from the 1 in 14 years. So I have no preference.
Oh, I'm sorry for your luck because you're gonna be long suffering.
But hey, go Cowboys.
I'll see. Where's the Falcons at down there in Atlanta? I'm not sure what your squad is.
Oh man, okay. Now you're going below the belt, Gary. You're going a little below the belt.
You know what? They got a new coach. Which means they're just as good as West Virginia that doesn't have a team.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean the Falcons. I meant the Crows.
Now you all probably didn't see my article this week on reconsideration of value of our old coach and our new coach. So that's been getting a lot of responses. I think I put that out on Friday, and I think I was up to 800 impressions and comments from all across the board. So if you all go to my LinkedIn newsletter, take a look at that. But let me close the program. Again, thank you all for coming on to Thaddeus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil. We will see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.